All right, friends. Hello, hello. Welcome to video 3 for the day. Just want to thanks again for your patience with getting all of these uploaded and such. Technology has not been my friend today, so hopefully this one goes off without a hitch. But we'll see. It's a very Monday of a Tuesday. That's okay. Once again, just gotta remind you, smart book reading assignments, please start chipping away at those. I cannot stress that enough. We've now finished chapter 11, and now we're moving into chapter 12, we're going to spend actually quite a bit of time on chapter 12, talking about the various types of plankton that are out there, and the primary productivity and what that means, and the biological pump, like all of this wonderful circle of life sort of stuff. So which I think is really interesting. So I hope that you find it just as interesting as I do. But we gotta still keep moving through the material or through the assignments that from past materials. So please do that. Okay, so what I also want to just quickly say before we move into talking about like the small plankton, the little cute plankton, is that there are a subsector of plants in the oceans that are not necessarily considered plankton, but they're considered marine photoautotrophs. And those can include things like seagrass, mangrove trees, and microalgae, which are large plant-like algae, very much like anything that's mixed in with salt marshes or kelp, things like that. So just wanted to mention that before we jumped into some of these little fun creatures. Perhaps you've heard of the word plankton or the term plankton from the TV show SpongeBob, right? So the main kind of like antagonist is that little plankton dude who's evil, but in reality, plankton are the real backbone of not only the oceans, but in all arguments for the world. It's not just for the creatures that live in the oceans, but for everybody. So when we're considering plankton, what they're these small little creatures that float around with the currents and are suspended in the seawater. We've already kind of touched on these animals called plankton before, right? We talked about those 4 categories of creatures in the ocean. We have our floaters, which are plankton, so they can only kind of go horizontally in the water, not by their choice. They go horizontally because of the way that the water is moving. They can move vertically though, which is what we just talked about in the previous video in terms of buoyancy. So they are generally categorized by size, and how we're going to work through them in this unit is by size. So we're going to start small and grow bigger. And there's kind of 3 main categories of plankton. We have phytoplankton. So those are creatures that use solar energy to help generate oxygen and produce food that fuels the rest of the ocean. So they, again, are the backbone. It's believed that, phytoplankton can actually produce 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we have in our air, right? Which is super wild. We always think about the Amazon rainforest as being the lungs of the planet or whatever, but there's more to it than just that. Then we have cyanobacteria. So these are the only bacterial phytoplankton, the rest of which are eukaryotic. So if we recall back to the very beginning of this unit, when we talked about evolution and the 2 kind of categories that we have the prokaryotes and eukaryotes. The cyanobacteria are more on the prokaryotic end, where everyone else is a little bit more complex in nature. And then we have zooplankton. Zooplankton can be unicellular and multicellular, and in general consume other organisms. So they're heterotrophs. Some can also be autotrophs and heterotrophs. They can kind of be like a mixotroph, if you will. And many of the juvenile stages of non-planktonic organisms start as zooplankton, like a magnificent amount of animals that we know as being like these big creatures actually start as these little buddies. So it's really fascinating, I think, to consider. Some more little tidbits about plankton are that most phytoplankton are unicellular, but some can form chains of connected cells. But they can act independently of one another. So starting here on the left, This is a chain of diatoms, and you can like see how they're basically like little separate, like 5 little separate rectangles. So those separate rectangles, they don't interact with each other. Though they are connected, their processes are all within that one organism. And then on the right-hand side, it kind of looks like a skewer, right? If you were to get like a little skewer of chicken, or a skewer of shrimp or whatever, that's just the vibe that this gives me. But again, you have 4 separate phytoplankton that are simply connected by this sort of, it almost looks like a needle, right? But they are all like they're all independent, but they are connected through this needle, if you will. So like I said, we're going to start small with some of the different types of plankton that are out there. So we're going to start first with bacterioplankton. So bacterioplankton are unicellular, which means they're commonly less than 1 to 2 microns. So that term micron is basically like this. You see this little U here that kind of has like the front doohickey. That's the symbol for a micron. They tend to have no internal membrane-bound cell structures, yet they are a significant food source for planktonic larvae and single-celled zooplankton and mixotrophic algae. So it's like in this food web on the right-hand side, you can kind of see these arrows are going back and forth from between going like from here to here, or consuming this, or eating this, or whatever. And there's this sort of microbial loop that occurs from this process, which is really fascinating, I think. So yeah, so they're ideal food for some of these other smaller sort of creatures here. And then they can break things down, just turn into dissolved and particulate organic material, that kind of thing. So they are really the base. Then we have a word that we are all too familiar with, viruses. So there are viruses in the ocean. They are non-cellular particles that are composed of genetic material which is surrounded by a protein coat. They can only carry out their activities inside of a host, and they can infect all living things. Anything from down to like the smallest thing from bacteria all the way up to whales, which is really kind of horrifying. And they can have a huge impact on microbial communities. The abundance of viruses are much higher where there's more bacteria and plankton present, which is generally closer to the coastlines. You probably won't see many viruses out in the open ocean, at least near the surface, because there's just not a whole lot of activity there. Viruses can't exist if there's not a host to be there. And they are also major pathogens of marine microbes. Likely to the extent of the viral-induced death of microbes varies depending on the environment under study. When viruses kill a microbe, the cell is then lysed, and the cell's organic matter is released as dead organic material. So if the virus comes in, kills it, and then it's released down. So now we're going to move up in size a little bit to a very fun little creature called a diatom. So diatoms can generate as much as 90% of the organic matter that is produced during phytoplankton blooms. They are estimated to be responsible for 40% of the marine primary productivity, which is really fascinating. A lot of them have a silica cell wall, that makes them heavier than seawater. So oftentimes they'll produce little spines and other protrusions in order to make them more buoyant. Which if you can kind of see in this bottom right one, those little spines, right? They oftentimes are symmetrical in some way, shape, form, or another. They can either be radial or bilateral symmetrical. They, like this one here in the bottom right, is more of a radial symmetric diatom, whereas the bilateral would be up here at the very top. Because it's kind of more elongated and shaped more or less like a cigar box. So kind of interesting. Something that's really fascinating to me, I think, about plankton in general is they're so small, and Mother Nature has made something so tiny but so symmetrical that happens to be like the base of everything. It really just kind of trips me out a little bit. here are just some more pictures of different representatives of diatoms in coastal waters. So you can see how they can vary in shape, they can vary in size, but they are all of the same kind of type of plankton. So they can be rectangular, they can kind of look like little wormy worms, they can be circular or triangular or more of like this really long, like almost looks like, I don't know, like a piece of pasta or something. But they're all of the same species, which is or not species, but the same parent. And then maybe you've wondered how these things reproduce. So all phytoplankton reproduce asexually, which means that one cell divides to form two different cells. So we have the parent cell, which splits the genetic material. One of them is larger than the other. The daughter cell, I think, is one daughter cell is the same size as the parent, and the other one is smaller. But then they'll both kind of fill in that outer sort of pillbox material on the outside. The next little creature I want to talk about is dinoflagellates. So dinoflagellates have a cell wall, or there's two types, of dinoflagellates. We have one with a cell wall that's made out of cellulose, and we say that those are naked. Then we have another dinoflagellate, which has more of a plate-like structure, and we say that that is armored. So dinoflagellates are often found in low nutrient environments, and they often will possess two little flagella, so they can swim vertically. So that's what we can see here. Some also photosynthesize. Not all of them do, but some do, and that's what we can see in this one here. So the top image is just like a straight up visible image, and the bottom image is one that is filtered through a blue light, and so this redness that we see here is chlorophyll. So we can tell that it has those chlorophyll properties, meaning that it can photosynthesize. Other dinoflagellates are very well known because they can bioluminescence. So there's actually a bloom going on right now down in San Diego, and the waves are like this really bright blue at nighttime, which is really kind of fascinating. Could be harmful. What I've seen on social media is called a red tide, which kind of has some negative connotations. But if you are down in San Diego and you see the waves and they're blue, you could be like, oh my gosh, those are dinoflagellates. How neat. But because of that, then they are one of the most well-known species. Other ones can also produce toxins that are then biomagnified through the food web. So biomagnification simply means that if a creature ingests a toxic animal, then they then have that toxin in them, and then if they get eaten, then that one that eats the other one is then going to also contain that toxin. It'll just continue up the food web. This can also infect humans and other marine mammals. So there are oftentimes they'll do water sampling for various locations, and if the water samples turn out that there is a sort of bloom going on that it will be harmful to humans, then they won't allow for fishing to occur there, which is actually a good thing, right? I don't really want to die from toxins through the water. No thanks. And these are just two examples of different types of dinoflagellates as well. And then your book also has a really cute little sort of sketch or various sketches of different dinoflagellates, and they all just look so really interesting, right? So these are representative species of different coastal dinoflagellates. Like this one here kind of looks like the helmet from Mandalorian. This one here kind of looks like Patrick from SpongeBob, but like fatter without arms. This one kind of looks like a jug. This one looks like a seashell. I don't know. I just think they're really neat looking, and they're just so cool. I don't know. I just have such an affinity towards plankton. So when we return all together, we will continue talking about different types of plankton and harmful algal blooms, and then we'll go into the larger actual plankton. So as per the usual, thank you so much for your time and attention, and I will see you all in a few days, and thanks for watching.